Friends, ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to Kingdom Animalia. In the previous lesson, we looked at Kingdom Plante and we saw the plants. I gave you an assignment of protecting the environment, especially the plants. That if you love yourself, you should love to protect the plants. So thank you very much. I know some of you have started doing that. And the best way of protecting plants is also planting more. So thank you very much. In this lesson, we want to look at Kingdom Animalia. And as I was growing up, I used to admire some of the animals, like the penguins, the peacocks, some good birds. Interesting, very beautiful animals. As time goes on, people eventually eat some of these animals. People eat meat from the cow, the bulls. People enjoy grasshoppers, my friend. Others, fish is a delicacy. Well, at home, some people keep the cats and the dogs. Those are the pets at home. But also there are animals that are very fierce. The lions of this world, the buffaloes. I don't know whether you have ever imagined interacting with a snake. Well, in this lesson, in addition to admiring, eating, keeping them as pets, and watching fierce animals, and so on, we are also going to, first of all, classify them. Let us know where they belong. So in this kingdom, we are going to classify them. And we're going to classify, ranging from the smallest organisms, animals in the sea, in the waters, to the giant elephants, giraffes, and the chimps, and even man. We are going to find out where they actually belong. Well, welcome to Kingdom Animalia. What are their characteristics? I mean, how do you know that this organism is an animal? What should it show? What should I see from an organism to confirm that it is an animal? Otherwise, the word animal in most cases has been misused. So until you see the following, it will not be healthy for you to scientifically mention that an organism is an animal. So let's go through the characteristics of animals. To begin with, their cells lack cell walls. When you do cytology, you realize that animal cells, the last outer membrane is called the cell membrane or the plasma membrane. They do not have the cell wall like it is in fungi or plants. So they lack cell walls. And then what is also important is that most of the animals can move from one place to another. That means they are motile or mobile. They can locomote. They can move from one place to another. But at A level, I know you will also accept this fact that there are some animals that do not move, or there are some stages of some animals that do not move. They are sessile or they are static. For example, the polyp stages of the poriferans, the sponges, we shall see, and the cnidarians. Some of them do not move, as we shall see shortly. All animals are multicellular. They are made up of many cells. Well, I hope now you should be proud of that at least we are not like an amoeba or paramecium that has one cell. Well, animals have many cells. That's great. And then they have a developed nervous system, except in sponges. Those are the most primitive animals that we shall see. Well, but before we look at these animals, we look at the different phyla, let's look at some of the terms that we are going to use in the study of animals. Remember, the study of animals is called zoology, the branch of biology that deals with the study of animals. And I would like to pronounce that at this moment, all of you are zoologists. All of you are, tell your neighbor, I am a zoologist. Wow, that's great. So let's look at the terms which are used in the study of animals. One, there's the term tissue. Well, what's a tissue? I know you know this. This is a group of cells, often similar in structure and origin, operating together to perform a specific function. So many cells that perform similar function make a tissue. We have very many tissues: photosynthetic tissue in plants. In animals, we have the muscle tissues and many other tissues. Then we have tissue differentiation. This is simply the specialization of different tissues to perform different what? Functions. The body has very many functions that are performed by different systems and organs. But inside those organs, there are tissues that are specialized to perform those functions. An organ. This is a structural, distinct part of the body which is usually performing a particular function. For example, we have, which organs do you know? In plants, we have leaves, fruits, stems, those are organs. Flowers, those are. Now, in animals, the heart is an organ, the brain, an eye, the nose, your tongue is an organ, and many others. That part of the body that is specialized to perform a given function is an organ. Unusual organs relate with each other to perform a common good for the body. Then an organism. This is the interrelationship of different organs or organ systems which together perform a specific what? Function. So an organism, for an entity to be called an organism, it means there must be a number of organ systems interrelating together to form what we call one living entity called an organism. Well, that's great. The other term is symmetry or symmetrical body. Well, we are going to be using this term, but symmetry is the body, or symmetrical body is that body which can be cut to produce two halves or more halves which are mirror images of each other. For example, if you cut something into two and each part equals the other, then you say it is bilaterally symmetrical. We shall see the types of symmetry. So a symmetrical body is that one that can be cut and can produce halves which are identical to each other. And we have types of symmetry. One is bilateral body symmetry. A bilateral symmetrical body is that one which can be divided into two equal halves along one plane only. For example, your body, the human body, can be divided into two equal parts, where you have one leg on one side, one leg on the other, one hand on this side, like that. Half of the head on this side, one eye on the other side. You can divide the body into two equal parts. Just confirm from your body. Imagine if you divide it into two. Just imagine. Don't do it practically, but just estimate where you can divide your body into two. And then which other organisms can obey that rule? Try out different organisms in your compound. Can they be divided into two equal parts from the middle? If they obey that rule, then you can classify them under bilateral symmetrical bodies. Well, I know you're going to do that. The other one is radial symmetrical body, from radial symmetry. So this is a body which can be cut along more than one plane to produce halves that are identical to each other. So in this case, you can divide an organism into more than two, but all the parts are equal. Look at that starfish. You can divide it into 5 equal parts, and we say it is pentaradial. So it can be divided into 5 equal parts. So it has a pentaradial symmetry. Well, what about asymmetrical? Another term. There are organisms that are asymmetrical. So asymmetrical means they cannot be divided to produce any equal part. No. Even if you divide them, you cannot produce equal or similar halves. And they include the sponges. These ones we shall look at them. Members of phylum porifera. And then even the snail cannot be divided into equal halves. So members, those are some of the terms that we are going to be using in this kingdom Animalia. To proceed, let's look at the levels of organization. Yeah, the levels of organization. We have the unicellular level or single cell level of organization. Protists have all the functions which are carried out by an organ system being performed by a single organelle in the cell. Such organisms include paramecium, amoeba, plasmodium, and so on. So the unicellular level organization means, or is sometimes called cell level organization, simply means that an organism is just one cell. The whole organism is summarized in one cell. For example, in paramecium, or in a euglena, or in a plasmodium, such that inside the cell there are organelles, and those organelles perform different functions for that cell. For example, in the paramecium we have the contractile vacuole, which is used for excretion, yeah, and many other vacuoles, which are many other parts which are inside. So those are the organelles. They perform the role that would have been performed by organs in a bigger organ, in higher organisms. So that is what we call unicellular level. In simple terms, we say those are organisms that are single-celled, where the whole organism is just one cell. Then we have tissue level of organization. So these are usually primitive multicellular organisms, or majorly animals, in which the physiological processes are carried out mainly by isolated cells and tissues. By isolated cells and what? Tissues. Apart from the reproductive organs, there are no structures that can be regarded as organs, but most of the cells are integrated to form tissues. Such animals represent a stage of evolution preceding the development of organs and organisms, which are characteristic of higher forms. Tissue level is considered to be between the colonial and the unicellular level of organization, and usually found in some animals like the hydra. Well, tissue level organization is simply all functions in the organism are performed by tissues or cells organized into tissues, and this happens in some organisms like the hydra, and even in some sponges, as we shall see. And then we have colonial level of organization. These organisms have different types of cells, each carrying out a different function. They are therefore regarded as colonies of single cells rather than multicellular. Like for example, the sponges. The whole organism is just made up of a group of cells, and those groups of cells, each group performs its own function. But in the long run, all of them unite to form one organism. They all coordinate to form an organism. For example, in sponges. So that one is called the colonial level of organization. And then we have the organ level of organization. Plants, animals, especially higher animals like the mammals, and the majority of others that are higher than the cnidarians, they have their functions carried out mostly by organs and organ systems. So you find in an organism there is an organ system. For example, you have the respiratory system, which has the lungs, the trachea, the nose, and so on. Then we have the circulatory system, which has the heart, it has the blood vessels, and so on. We have the digestive system, which has uh, the stomach, the ileum, the duodenum, and the rest of the parts. So in that kind of organization, you find that organs are coordinated to perform functions, to form a system that performs what? Functions. So this kind of organization is called the organ level of organization and can be found in higher organisms, in plants, and also in higher animals. Great. So those are the levels of organization that we need to know, and the terms in general. So let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of unicellular level of organization. Having only one cell. Is it good or bad? Well, there are advantages, though there may be also other disadvantages. So advantages of having only one cell. The whole organism is made up of just one cell. These are the advantages. The small size enables them to live in a variety of habitats. They can fit, because they can fit in very small spaces. You remember the archaea, the bacteria, the protists, they can colonize different environments because of their small size. And then their requirements for food are low, so therefore they take less food, which is an advantage for them, because obviously the whole body is just one cell, so the body requirements are very low. There is no need for the development of complex excretory organs since they take less food. So because the food intake is very low, so there is no need, there will be limited wastes produced. There will be low quantities of wastes. Therefore, the body membrane, the cell membrane, can be sufficient to eliminate those wastes. So therefore, they don't need a whole excretory system to remove wastes. So which is an advantage for them. There is no necessity for development of complex circulatory and gaseous exchange structures, since simple diffusion can sustain the organism. So they can easily obtain respiratory gases, and they can easily eliminate the waste products via their membranes. So there is no need for complex systems. So it's advantageous to be a single-celled organism in that way. And then there is no need for development of complex support systems like the cartilage, bones, and xylem, since they are just made up of one cell. Imagine a bacteria having a skeleton made up of bones. That definitely can't happen. So their locomotion is just modifications of the cell, so to develop locomotory structures, simple locomotory structures and support systems. So there is no need for complex bones, cartilage, and so on. So those are the advantages of being single-celled. What about when there are very many cells? Organisms that have very many cells. What are the advantages? One, if you have very many cells, the worn-out cells are easily replaced by cell division. So even if cells are destroyed, they can easily be replaced. Imagining, what about for the single cell? If the one cell is damaged, that is the end of it, the end of the whole organism. But for the multi-cell organisms, every day they lose a number of cells, but they have the ability to replace those cells, which is advantageous without necessarily affecting the whole life of the organism. And then multicellularity allows tissue specialization, which increases efficiency in performing body functions. So you realize that the tissues specialize to perform different functions, and the whole organism performs functions much more efficiently compared even to the single-celled organisms. And then they have complex physiological mechanisms which enable maintenance of relative constant internal environment. So it is easy to maintain homeostasis because of employment of the systems in the body. Elimination of waste, balancing temperature, and so on is much possible because of the well-established systems in the body. They have a larger complex support system which increases chances of catching the prey, but also reduces chances of predation. So these multicellular organisms have locomotor structures, they have sense organs that enable them, first of all, to escape from predators. In case the enemies have arrived, they can run away. But also, they can enable them to pursue the prey, to look for food, to look for mates, and so on. That is only possible when you have complex support systems. And then they have an efficient sensory system due to tissue specialization, which enables animals to escape from predators quickly. So they are able to sense very fast and then run away from the predators to avoid predation. You have seen the antelopes in the savannah. They have large ears and they can even rotate. The ears can rotate to hear whatever is happening in the environment. They have keen sight that can see even from a long distance, and that enables them to survive, which is not possible probably in the single-celled organisms. Great. But also being multicellular presents challenges. So we want to look at the disadvantages of having many cells, or disadvantages of multicellular level of organization. One, they require large quantities of food. Because there are many cells and each cell is metabolizing and they require raw materials for metabolism, so they require a large quantity of food, which sometimes is not easy to get. Then two, they require specialized locomotor structures to enable them to move from one place to the other. When you have many cells, then you require either a skeletal system or a support system that can enable movement from one place to the other. Yes. And then they produce a large quantity of wastes. So when you produce a large quantity of wastes, because of eating very many quantities of food or materials, it means that you need an excretory system to remove these wastes. Otherwise, excess wastes may become toxic to the body. So that's another challenge. And you have seen that people who have kidney failure or liver challenges, the waste accumulate in the body and can intoxicate the body and can even be fatal. They have small surface area to volume ratio that requires development of transport systems, since simple diffusion cannot supply enough nutrients to the animal. So these organisms cannot depend on diffusion and osmosis alone. They require a full, complete transport system to move materials, for example, respiratory gases, from respiratory surfaces to the tissues where they are required, to move absorbed food from the digestive system to respiring tissues or to the liver, and so on and so forth. So they require a lot of systems, which may be difficult. Great. So after having looked at that, which animal now can you identify there? Are you seeing some of the levels of organization that we have just mentioned in those animals? Are you seeing challenges faced by animals on looking at those pictures? Are you also seeing advantages that are there for some of those animals? Which one do you think is most successful? Or which ones are very many where you are? So Kingdom Animalia has very many members, as you can see there, ranging from very small to very large. And then they also have, and those organisms are now classified into different phyla, as we shall see the different phyla which are there. We shall look at the sponges, porifera, cnidaria, nematoda, annelida, arthropoda, echinodermata, chordata, and many and others as well. There are up to about 33 phyla in Kingdom Animalia, but for purposes of our study, we shall concentrate on the 8 major phyla. Those are the ones we shall, the 9 major phyla. Those are the ones we shall look at in our study. So to begin with, phylum porifera. Which animals are you identifying there? So that yellowish orange member is an animal. That member is an animal and belongs to phylum porifera, and it is called a sponge. Many are sponges, and these ones are aquatic or marine. Actually, they live in marine habitats, so they are filter feeders down in the sea. That's where you can find them. Did you know that they were animals? Well, today you need to accept and appreciate that the sponges are actually animals. So let's look at their characteristics. The sponges are considered the oldest and the most primitive animal group. Yeah, they are the most primitive, meaning they are lower animals. They lack most of the characteristics that higher animals have. For example, characteristics man has may not be there in sponges. However, they share a lot as well. So they are multicellular but don't have tissues or organs. So there are many cells. They are just made up of colonies of cells. Cells performing different functions to sustain an entity of life, but they don't even have tissues. The name porifera means pore bearer in Latin. The pore is a tiny hole, so it means they are perforated. These organisms are perforated. They have some pores in their bodies. Their body is covered by a skin which is one cell thick. So this skin has lots of small pores and few large openings that we shall see. The small openings are the entrances of complex systems and channels. The channels lead to inner chambers lined with specialized feeding cells called the choanocytes or the collar cells. So we shall see those collar cells which are used for feeding. These collar cells pump water through the entire sponge and filter out food for the sponge cells to eat. So for them, they get their food from the water. The choanocytes pump water through the cells, and cells filter out what is food and then feed on it. And that's how they feed. They don't have the capacity to chase after food. They just filter from the water and get food from there. So therefore, they are called filter feeders. The body of the sponge is a loose collection of about 6 different types of specialized cells, colonies of different cells. Some of these cells secrete supporting skeletal matter, either collagen fibers or sharp mineral pieces called the spicules. Other cells in the sponge carry out growth, repair, nourishment, or reproduction. So in this sponge, it is just like a partnership of different cells together to form a living entity, each one of them performing different function. So when you look at the structure there, you will be able to see generally how the structure of the body looks like. It has pores, as you can see, larger pores. Then there are collar cells there which are used for filter feeding. Then a specule there is for protection, and together with the epidermal cells are for protection as well. And usually it's attached on the rocks on the bottom of the sea. That's where you can find them. So as water moves, they also keep on filtering the water. They are filter feeders. And those members are animals. So you can look at them there. Deep in the sea, those who do zoology dive down and observe these organisms and interact with them. Fish sometimes hides in some of these organisms and hides from other predators. Well, they make the sea very beautiful, but don't forget that they are animals. These members are animals. They are members of kingdom Animalia. So let's continue with their characteristics. They are organized as a collection of different kinds of cells which are specialized. They just have a cell level of organization, colonial level of cells. They have no tissues, they are just at cell level. The skeleton is not there. Therefore, what supports them is the spicules, which are used for support and protection. They are generally marine organisms. They live in majorly in salty water, although there are some few in fresh water. So if you are looking for sponges, you go into the water. Their bodies are asymmetrical. They do not have any symmetry. They are neither bilateral, neither radial. They don't have any symmetry. You cannot divide them into equal parts. The body shape can be cylindrical or sac-like, as you saw earlier. They are like sacs. They are like sponge. The name sponges comes from their structure. Yeah, they have loosely attached structure which looks like a sponge. They are diploblastic animals with two layers, the outer dermal layer and the inner gastro layer. The outer layer is called the ectodermis, then the inner layer is the endodermic. So organisms that have two layers, two germ layers, is called a diploblastic organism. So the sponges are diploblastic. They have two layers. Many sponges can filter their entire body volume in less than 1 minute. So they have a high capacity of filtering. In case if you pour any harmful material or poison or colored material, you can see them filtering it out, pushing it out, eliminating it from the body. So they have a very high capacity of filtering different materials from them. So those are sponges, and they are also animals belonging to phylum porifera. That's great. I want to thank you very much for being attentive, and I want you to continue appreciating these organisms. Thank you, and be